Hi, I'm Dwayne Brown. Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, millions of Californians could become fraud victims because of a huge jump in data breaches. Protesters bring UC San Diego trying to save a campus landmark.
And why the Nuclear Regulatory Commission won't approve the decommissioning plan for San Onofre's nuclear power. I'm Peggy Pico with the next steps for nuclear waste. Then you give up driving doesn't mean you have to give up your freedom. How you grew.
And the Navy and Marines team up at Camp Pendleton testing a new ship that could be a game changer the next time troops are sent to a disaster zone. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Hi, good evening. Thanks for joining us. The state attorney general says 18.5 million Californians were hit by computer hackers last year, a 600% increase from 2012. Kamala Harris says as many as 1/3 of those folks will become victims of fraud. Now, most of the breaches were in the retail sector due to problems at Target and at online marketplace called Living Social. The biggest targets for hackers, payment cards and online credit. Harris says retailers should use stronger encryption methods to protect customers. The federal government is suing AT&T on behalf of millions of smartphone customers. The lawsuit claims customers were promised unlimited data plans but reduced data speeds if they went over a certain limit in a month, slowing down things like web browsing or GPS navigation. The suit says customers weren't warned it could happen. AT&T denies misleading smartphone users. San Diego City Council has approved paying nearly $6 million to one of the women assaulted by former police officer Anthony Arevalos. Insurance will cover most of the payment to Jane Doe. This is the last of the civil cases connected to Arevalos. He's now in prison. UC San Diego Medical Center has been named a priority hospital for Ebola patients, but a group of nurses from the Hillcrest facility say it's not prepared. They were joined today by representatives of the state's largest nurses union, calling for rigorous training and better protective gear.
We would like to have the in-person training, and have drills. We have scenarios, but we would like people to have drills. The buddy system, which is 2 nurses, one puts on the gear, the other one checks out to make sure that it's all intact. And get people prepared in case we have an Ebola patient.
The hospital disputes the nurses' claims, saying it's ready and training is underway. The hospital says doctors, nurses, and respiratory therapists are part of the Ebola response team. Dozens of folks protested at UC San Diego, hoping to save the Che Cafe. The university is evicting the longtime campus landmark. KPBS culture reporter Angela Carone says the protesters are hoping school officials change their minds.
Protesters drummed on paint buckets and cooking pans. They carried homemade signs. And they marched from the cafe to the chancellor's office, where they'll deliver a petition to save the Che Cafe. Renee Vera is a member of the collective that runs the venue.
By hand delivering over 13,000 signatures that have been collected over just a couple months, we hope that he begins to understand how important this space is.
Chicano Park muralist Mario Terrero even showed up with his own handmade sign. Music lover Zarina Shefa has been seeing bands play here for 8 years. She met her husband at the Che Cafe.
We had hopes of bringing our daughter here when she's a little bit older. She's 5, so just to see local artists playing and just enjoy the diversity and the art here.
The school says the building needs $700,000 in repairs. A judge recently ruled in favor of the university after UCSD sued the collective for refusing to vacate the building. The Che Cafe's attorney plans to ask the judge to consider additional evidence and may file an appeal. Vera says the Che Cafe is a lot of things to the community.
It's a gathering place. It's not just a event space, and it's not just an art space, and it's not just a kitchen. It's all of those things in combination where people can find a little something of what speaks to them here.
It's also a space where students have learned political activism, skills they are using now to try and save the Che Cafe. Angela Caron, KPBS News.
We have an update now on a story we told you about last week. Alliance San Diego took their message directly to voters this morning, encouraging passengers on Metropolitan Transit to vote next Tuesday. MTS denied the group permission to place ads on their buses based on a policy that only allows ads that serve a commercial purpose. MTS said they'd be interested in a partnership if Alliance could demonstrate how their ads would increase ridership. Now, the group says City Council President Todd Gloria, who sits on the MTS board, has agreed to put the policy up for discussion in the future. A new city audit has some advice about San Diego's efforts to fight graffiti. Keep it simple. The audit says the current reporting process is too confusing, and there are 3 different agencies in charge of removing graffiti depending on where it's found. The auditor recommends centralizing the work. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission is reviewing plans to decommission San Onofre in the North County, but as Peggy Pico explains tonight, the federal agency does not have authority to approve it.
The power plant was permanently shut down last year following a small radiation leak in one of its reactors. Now the process of decommissioning is underway. Here with the next steps are my guest, David Victor, chairman of the Community Engagement Panel, a group organized by Southern California Edison, the majority owner and operator of the plant, and KPBS North County Bureau Chief Allison St. John, who attended last night's NRC meeting. And welcome. Now, Allison, what was the purpose of last night's meeting?
It was for the NRC, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, to review the post-shutdown decommissioning activities report, PSDAR for short, and take comment from the public.
And speaking about that comment, what kind of concerns or some of the main concerns did you hear from the public?
Well, one of the things that came up most was the casks that the radioactive spent fuel will be stored in, because this site will be decommissioned and most of the materials will be removed, but the spent fuel will remain on site. So most of the people who asked questions last night were concerned about how is that going to be done, and what about the casks in which that spent fuel is going to be stored. They were very concerned that there might not be a plan for if the casks cracked. They said the casks have only been used for 2 or 3 decades already. What evidence do we have that they could hold up for decades into the future? Because right now there is an indefinite time frame on how long that fuel will have to be stored on the site.
And David, you've been with the Edison's community plan for committee for some time now. What are some of the specific concerns? Are they the same as Allison heard last night?
Yeah, so definitely the most vocal concerns have been raised around the question of the spent fuel. But I think a lot of people have been surprised to learn that because the federal government's not going to take the fuel away and move it to Nevada over the long term, that we're going to be stuck with the fuel in the community for the foreseeable future. I do want to say that there's a growing number of people in the public who are also interested in jobs. The decommissioning process can be a huge employer. They want to make sure those jobs, as many of them as possible, stay in the local community. People are concerned about ocean impacts, the conduits, the big pipes that go in and out of the ocean. What do we do with those? What's the best thing ecologically? And so I think I'm starting to hear more of these other concerns come up, but certainly most of the attention that we've spent in the community engagement panel has been focused on the spent fuel issue.
Let's talk about that spent fuel a little bit, David. So how toxic is it, and how long will it be stored, do we know, at San Onofre?
Well, so it's radioactive fuel, and you want to keep the fuel away from the public and everything else. And so the strategy right now, and this is widely done in the industry, is put into these canisters, weld them shut, and then monitor them over time. What's new is that we're looking at not 20 years or so of canisters on site, but 40, 50, 60 years. And frankly, we don't know. I think the public's losing confidence in the federal government, the Department of Energy in particular, to step up to the plate and do what it said it would originally do, which is take the fuel off site. And so now we're stuck with the reality, and we might want something different, but we're stuck with the reality that we in the public need to pay attention to what the long-term defense in depth aging management program, was what the Nuclear Regulatory Commission calls it, what that looks like, and make sure that works.
And speaking of that management program, Allison, one of the most surprising things about last night's meeting, I think, that came out is the NRC said they're choosing not to approve this plan. However, they say that they are going to be pretty involved in the plan. How involved are they going to be, and why did they choose not to officially approve this plan?
Yes, well, I think it's a choice of words. They are going to be reviewing the plan and they will have inspectors who come back during tricky points of the decommissioning process. But they are not going to approve or disapprove the plan, and I think this is partly because they want to say very clearly that the liability, should anything go wrong, is not theirs, it is the licensees. However, right at the end of the process, when the license is actually terminated, that is when the NRC would approve the plan. So in a sense, the ball is in Edison's court to make sure that this thing works. The NRC will be reviewing it, but they're not going to approve the plan.
So that said, David, then what are the next steps?
Well, so this plan is like a milestone in a long-term process of decommissioning. The next steps are to continue the process of decommissioning, which has actually already begun. When you drive up the 5, on the east side of the 5, those buildings are being removed. That land's being given back to the Navy. The process of draining pipes and starting to remove materials from the main site is beginning. They're shrinking the site. So all of that is in motion. I think the next thing for us to watch in the community is the decision about which vendor of these casks, these canisters, will be selected, and then to make sure that the program that's in place for managing these casks is a good one. I have to say, we in the community engagement panel have spent a huge amount of time on this in the last 4 or 5 months, and I have gained tremendous confidence in the plan.
And that's the storage containers, the canisters that basically are holding the spent fuel. Allison, who's paying for this decommissioning process?
Edison has collected more than $4 billion over the life of the plant from ratepayers. So essentially ratepayers are the ones that foot the bill. And Edison is saying that they have enough money in that fund to complete the process. However, with an indefinite time period stretching into the future, it is very difficult to guarantee that that money will be enough.
All right, Allison St. John and David Victor, thanks so much. And I want to let folks know that you can still submit comments to the NRC. Just go to kpbs.org and click on a link that sets you right to the comments that you can post on this process.
An environmental group wants a federal court to review its claim over the Diablo Canyon nuclear plant along the Central Coast. Friends of the Earth say the NRC broke its own rules when it altered the operating license for the plant's reactors without a proper review. There is an ongoing dispute over danger from nearby earthquake faults. Diablo Canyon is the last operating nuclear plant in California. A federal agency may cut funding for earthquake detection systems run by the Scripps Institution of Oceanography here. These systems measure tensions along fault lines in San Diego. County supervisors are asking the U.S. Geological Survey to leave the funding in place. They say the current system can give about 25 seconds warning before a temblor strikes.
Got main engines at 108%.
AVI power nominal.
Look at this. An unmanned commercial supply ship exploded tonight right after lifting off from Cape Canaveral. The rocket was bound for the International Space Station. NASA is paying 2 companies to deliver supplies to the station in the post-shuttle era. They include SpaceX and Hawthorne. Until now, the commercial missions have been nearly flawless. Navy and Marines are wrapping up 8 days of global crisis training at Camp Pendleton. KPBS reporter Susan Murphy tells us they've been testing a new ship that could be a game changer the next time they're called for humanitarian help.
2,000 Marines, sailors, and civilians from the 1st Marine Expeditionary Brigade and Expeditionary Strike Group 3 have joined together at Camp Pendleton to prepare for the next disaster, like a hurricane or tsunami.
So when game day gets here, and it will get here, we can get out there, and when we get in the red zone, it becomes really tough. We don't panic, because we practice it, we've rehearsed it.
Navy Rear Admiral Frank Pons is commander of Strike Group 3. He says the annual 8-day ship-to-shore training called Exercise Pacific Horizon prepares troops for responding to crises across the globe.
But let me bring it home. The brush fires that reoccur up and down this coast, the earthquakes that we just experienced in Napa Valley about a month ago.
During this mock drill, they're responding to the fictitious country of Acadia, home to 200,000 residents.
You are standing on the grounds of Acadia now. Acadia was hit by a series of storms and bad weather conditions. And they ask our nation, the United States, to support them in that time of need.
In response, Marines and sailors transport vehicles, equipment, and emergency supplies from 2 ships located 16 nautical miles offshore to the beaches of Acadia, or in this case, Camp Pendleton. Pond says the exercise reinforces the partnership between the Navy and Marines and combines their unique capabilities.
This gives them the opportunity to come forward and say, I have an idea. Let's try this. And we take that idea and we inject it into this process and we see if it works.
New for this year's exercise is one of the ships, the USNS Munford Point.
But that ship, USNS Montford Point, it was built by NASSCO in San Diego.
It's a massive 800-foot-long mobile landing platform that acts as a pier in the ocean. It looks like a ship with its entire middle section cut out. It can submerge part of its platform to be used as a docking and launching station for amphibious vehicles. The Munford can maneuver right up against a military cargo ship at sea. The 2 ships are side by side, connected by a loading ramp. Vehicles and freight are driven down the ramp from the cargo ship to the Munford's platform, then onto 3 amphibious vehicles, officially called Landing Craft Air Cushions, or LCACs.
We're doing about 10 trips a day with these LCACs.
Marine Colonel Bruce Pittman is overseeing 500 service members for the landward portion of the exercise.
We receive the gear here, make sure that it's operational, and we push it inland to the units to use. It's in support of an exercise based off a humanitarian assistance situation where an allied country has asked us to come in and provide some assistance in water production and engineering.
Within a few days, Pittman says the Marines have unloaded tons of emergency supplies and constructed a mini city of small modular buildings for housing and humanitarian assistance.
It's much quicker than the old system, which is terrific for the Marines. We get the gear to the beach much quicker and get it to the units much quicker.
Joaquin Malavet is commanding general of the 1st Marine Expeditionary Brigade, a crisis response force tasked with conducting self-sustained combat and humanitarian operations.
Part of the art and science of responding very quickly and effectively to crisis is to be forward postured, forward deployed, and provide presence well in advance. So our ability to move forces, both Navy and Marine Corps, into areas that we anticipate crises developing is key to our operational and strategic design.
Malavet says if the USNS Munford Point passes the test, it will soon be pre-positioned somewhere out in the ocean, like the military cargo ships, ready to respond when called upon. Susan Murphy, KPBS News.
I'm Judy Woodruff. On the next news hour, Gwen Ifill reports from North Carolina on a hotly contested race that could determine control of the Senate. That's Tuesday on the PBS NewsHour.
County supervisors want to give San Diego families a better way to find care for aging relatives. They voted to develop a rating system for residential care facilities after reports of poor care and negligence at some sites. 20 care facilities will take part in the pilot program. Aging adults who give up their car keys don't have to give up their freedom, thanks to a group helping them navigate the public transit system. Peggy Pico tells us how it works.
The new nonprofit group We Get Around offers San Diego County adults who are age 60 or older help in making the transition from driving to using the trolley and buses. My guest, Judy Bonilla, is a gerontologist and founder of the organization. Judy, welcome.
Well, thank you for having me on the show, Peggy.
You bet. Now, what is this, your program, We Get Around? What do you actually offer?
We offer adults age 60 plus the chance to get out in their community, to make new friends, and to really keep their, I'll say, independence, because that's so important as we age, to be able to travel independently, and most important, to travel confidently. Those are the keys.
And this is specific for people who might be giving up their keys, their driver's license, basically.
Most definitely. Again, everyone may not know it, but we outlive our ability to drive safely and confidently by about a decade. So at some point, all of us are going to have to think about what we're going to do. These people that take my class, that's what they're thinking about.
What's the most challenging part of trying to use public transit here in San Diego County?
The whole process. we're not a user-friendly community when it comes to public transportation. We don't have information kiosks. We don't have information booths. It's not a user-friendly experience. And because I've traveled in so many different countries, not knowing the language, it was really easy for me to identify all the barriers and roadblocks.
So you offer classes.
Yes.
Are they free classes? And basically, if you could walk us through what you do in these classes.
Certainly. Right now, I've been fortunate. I'm a fellow with Hispanics in Philanthropy, so they've underwritten my costs this last year. So that's been great. Going forward, I'm going to have to use a fee-paid model until I can get some grant funding, and also looking at a Kickstarter campaign so I can defray the cost. What it looks like, I have a brief orientation with my students before they even take the classes, because most people don't know that there's not public facilities at transit stops.
So no bathrooms.
So no bathrooms.
Okay, so a class, typically you sort of give them the overview, and then do you also go over schedules and that sort of thing?
And that's what we do in a weekly class. We meet together at a predetermined trolley station. I have a brief orientation about, we know where we're going. Say, for instance, a trip to Coronado. Some of my students haven't been there in 20 years because it's too far to drive. So we have a brief meeting at the Grossmont Transit Center. I hand out information about our trip. I tell them what we're going to be doing on the trip. We purchase our tickets. We board the bus together. All the while they're learning how to use the different features of the trolley at that point.
Who are your typical students, and what has the response been so far?
Oh, my students are, I want to say, in their mid-70s and are starting to decrease their driving. They might be doing that 10-mile radius around their home, not much more than that. And my students are pretty much people who've always traveled and who want to travel, or they might be someone who's coming perhaps after the death of a spouse, who realizes they might be getting socially isolated.
So they want to use this public transit. Do your classes also offer help to those who might have special needs, like visually impaired and/or people that are immobile?
Most definitely. A lot of my students have macular degeneration, which is one of the primary reasons people give up driving. So what I do is, again, make that transition from being a driver to perhaps someone who's no longer driving, and make that transition a lot easier so that they know how to access the handicap accessible features of it.
Just briefly, are other forms of transportation, including like coaster rail or medical shuttles, things like that?
We just do bus, trolley, and the coaster. Again, the medical area is, again, something that's usually handled by another organization.
Sure. What's the best way to approach the subject of, let's say, a family member needing to give up their driver's license?
Yeah. Well, if you're an adult child out there, you want to have a plan. You want to know your parents' community resource, and those are really just some phone calls to make to the city, to your local city, to find out what senior transportation options are out there. Because there's a volunteer taxi program in most cities. There are taxi vouchers that are available, and again, for someone who's still physically active and can get around, there's my program. And what I really try and do is ask people to see me first while their parents are still driving, so that they get familiar with the process of being independent in a different way. Not relying on a car, but looking at some other options.
All right, Judy Bonilla, thank you so much.
Oh, it's been a pleasure, Peggy. Thank you.
Hello, I am Oshbot, the Orchard Store robot helper. What are you looking for today?
Kind of cool. Robots may help you get around a hardware store someday. Orchard Supply Hardware testing these Oshbots at a store in San Jose. They can help you find a hammer or a nail, or even tell you if something is out of stock. The company says it's hoping the robots will improve customer service. The tech world is paying tribute to a San Diego legend. Today would have been Dr. Jonas Salk's 100th birthday. Google is honoring the late Salk on its homepage with a Google Doodle of children at play, saying, "Thank you, Dr. Salk, for the polio vaccine he developed in 1953. A decade later, he founded the Salk Institute in La Jolla. It's been 2 years since Allegiance opened to sellout crowds at the Old Globe in San Diego. George Takei's legacy project about the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II still hasn't opened on Broadway, but tomorrow it will be featured by Talks on Google with a live hour-long showcase on YouTube. Takei says it will include songs from the show and a Q&A with the creators. It starts at 10 in the morning on YouTube. Weather will be cooling slightly towards the end of the week. Expect some clouds along the coast tomorrow. Temperatures in the upper 70s, then dropping back to the low 70s by Halloween. A little warmer in the inland valleys, low 80s, then down to the mid 70s. Mountain temperatures will be in the low 70s, then mid 60s by Friday. As for the desert, it will stay warm, talking low 90s. Let's recap tonight's top stories. The state attorney general says 18.5 million Californians were hit by computer hackers last year, a 600% increase from 2012. Kamala Harris says as many as 1/3 of those folks will become victims of fraud. UC San Diego Medical Center has been named a priority hospital for Ebola patients, but a group of nurses from the Hillcrest facility say it's not prepared. They're calling for rigorous training and better protective gear. The hospital disputes the nurses' claims, saying it's ready and training is underway. Protesters rallied on the campus of UC San Diego today, trying to save the Shea Cafe. The co-op is being evicted by the university. School officials say the building needs $700,000 worth of repairs. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.